In our first reading, God appears to Solomon in a dream, and he says, "Ask something of me, and I will give it to you." Can you imagine that situation in your own life? God comes to you and basically grants you one wish. And of all the things that Solomon could have asked from God, the thing that he asked for is an understanding heart. An incredibly wise thing to ask for. And part of him asking that comes from a very humble place. He's newly assumed the throne and he's in charge of this vast land. And he says, it's up to me to judge people. That's something I know I can't do. It's up to me to determine what's right and wrong and to teach that to the people. I know that that's beyond me. So God, I need you to give me an understanding heart. I need you to give me your heart so that I can rightly do what you have called me to do. This place of humility really leads for him to ask this question. And it comes from him realizing that only God understands all things. Only he who created everything, only he who assigns things their place and their season can truly understand things. So only he can truly guide us. We move to the second reading, St. Paul. We know all things work for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purposes. Only God can understand how all things, every circumstance of our life, the most tragic, the most happy, we look globally, politically, we look at coronavirus, we look at everything going on. Only he can understand how these things can work for the good of those who love him. And so we really have to put ourselves in his hands. Finally, I'll move to the gospel. And Jesus' parables have so much depth. There's so many ways to understand them and explain them. But I want to point to the parable of the treasure buried in a field. It was once explained to me like this. It says, the field is who God is calling you to be. That treasure in the field is there just for you. And holiness, sanctity really comes down to us coming to take possession of that field that God has held out for us. For putting it first and foremost in front of everything else. And there might be a hesitancy in our hearts to do this because, well, who am I to take possession of this whole plot of land? But the reality is for all eternity, there's a certain field, there's a certain plot of land that God has marked out just for you and just for me. And our holiness, our coming fully into the life that God has promised us is going to come in claiming that ground for our own. God holds it out for us, but he wants us to claim it and surrender ourselves over to his understanding as to why he's given us that plot of land. Why has he buried the treasure in this particular plot of land, and why has he given it to our care? Only God can understand that. And so, like Solomon, we have to ask God for an understanding heart as we seek to understand, God, why do you have me here in this situation, in this body, with this mind, with these gifts and these weaknesses? Only he knows how he can work all things in your life for his good and his glory. And so let us be like Solomon and ask God for that understanding heart so that we may truly claim the ground that God has entrusted to us. That field with the treasure buried there, that's our life and God's plan for our life. Let us not be afraid to come into more full possession of it today.